All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Launchpad Podcast. I am your host, Gabriel Hardy, and in this episode today, I interviewed Christian Rasmussen. Christian Rasmussen is the founder of Minnesota Nice Ethnobotanicals. He is my business partner there. He is one of my best friends, and this is his second episode on the podcast. Just as a quick recap, if you didn't catch the first episode with Christian, like I said, he founded the company Minnesota Nice Ethnobotanicals, which we are one of, if not the biggest exporters and importers of Amanita Muscaria here in the United States. And Christian started Minnesota Nice Ethnobotanicals when he was going through benzo withdrawals. He was walking around his parents' property, was about a year into benzo withdrawals, was ready to commit suicide because, for people who don't know, benzo withdrawals are extremely brutal and can last several years, and you're basically, recovering from brain damage. And Christian was a year into his benzo withdrawals and was about to call it quits when he saw some Amanita out in nature and felt the strong calling to it. Looked it up online. There was only one person in the United States who was really actually providing real information about Amanita Dreamer. Got in contact with her, learned how to use it, started interacting with Amanita, felt like he had healed himself like 90% within a couple weeks. Saw this as a very efficacious plant medicine, and Amanita Dreamer asked him to start importing it to the United States because at the time there wasn't any reliable sources for it, because Amanita Muscaria has to be wild harvested. It's not something you can really, at least right now, industrially do and have a huge sort of grow up. And so there's a whole sort of interesting market in the sourcing of it and things like that. So that first episode really kind of unpacks a lot of the story of Minnesota Nice Ethnobotanicals. And like I said, I'm a partner now with Christian in that business. I highly recommend you go check out our shit. And so in this episode today, we're kind of unpacking Christian's story a little bit more and how Christian's story plays into this really sort of interesting collective story that's being played out, the collective hero's journey. And I really enjoyed this conversation. At the beginning there's a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of like friendly banter, but stick around because it gets very deep very quickly. But yeah, like I said, if you haven't already, please go check out our company, Minnesota Nice Ethnobotanicals. We really love what we do. We sell Amanita Muscaria here in the United States, the best quality at the best prices. If you find somebody who does it better, please let me know because I want to go check out what they got going on. But we sell Blue Lotus, Kava, Kana. We're always updating it with new products, always running sales and stuff like that. So go show us some love. And if you use the code Amanita Ninja at checkout, you'll get 10% off your order. But yeah, I really hope that you guys enjoy this conversation. Thank you for tapping back into my podcast. Much love. You said whenever you were speaking about cutting that thread there a minute ago, you had said something about it being like a hellish, like a hell realm, like a hellish type realm. And it reminded me, because like I've been to like it feels like a few different sort of like forms of that, of like these hellish realms. And I remember this one hellish realm that I was in. It wasn't necessarily like bad, like it wasn't like scary, like visually scary, but I was all alone. Like all it was like these like really spacey kind of like colors and some like patterns and shapes, but the rest of it was like this void, and I was completely alone in it, and it was matched with this sense of like deep loneliness. And that to me, like in that moment, at least during that experience, it felt like a form of like a hellish realm,
Yeah. That's what.
Yeah.
Are we recording right now?
Yeah, I went ahead and start because every time I record a podcast with somebody, dude, we end up talking for like 20 minutes before I hit record, and there's usually a bunch of like awesome shit said. So I now I just hit record right at the beginning.
Yeah, no, that's great because this is cool stuff that should be in the podcast. So what I said prior to all this was that I a few nights ago I cut the ultimate chord, which is the I'm looking away, I gotta look at the camera, which is the love chord and the attachments to love, like and the addictive
Yeah.
clingy side of love. We've talked before about how nothing in the world compares to like heartbreak. Like drug withdrawal doesn't get anywhere close to it. Like the pain from real intense heartbreak is absolutely brutal. It's the ultimate chord, and it's the chord of being attached to the creation where like, I've been thinking a lot about polarity recently, and like anything has polarity, love included. And on one side of that polarity is addictive, clingy attachment. And the other side of the polarity is extreme detachment. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
balance in there, and it's being detached with intense love. But yeah, so I cut this love cord, and I had to go to the depths of hell to do it. And I knew
Yeah.
that after I cut it, it was a really monumental ordeal for me to go through. It's been the culmination of all of the work that I've done over, the past 5 years. And all the shadows that I've integrated and healed. And it ended, and I did get massive influx of energies. That's a whole nother story. But today, yeah, I've had these somatic responses. Or yesterday, I ended up getting gluten, which fucks me up really bad, and I lost some money being an idiot throwing money at meme coins. But I do that, I like to gamble a little bit, risk taker. Anyways,
Yeah. You're a bad boy, good man, Christian.
well,
That's what Libby would call you.
it's funny because like I'm good at value investing, but I've never been good at meme coins. Like I did really good with Doge. But that one was relatively easy. But all the other meme coins, like I just haven't been good at because there's like no point to them. Like there's no utility, there's no value. It's all just like what is the collective like experience right now, or like you know Shib or Bowden, or I mean, there's all these like silly meme coins that really don't have any value or utility. However, this new one came out a few days ago called Peanut, based off of the squirrel that was murdered, Peanut the squirrel.
Oh
And
my
I didn't
god.
see it till yesterday, but immediately when I saw it, I was like, that's gonna be fucking huge. That's gonna be huge.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it till yesterday, unfortunately. But I'm wondering if the world starts turning, maybe it's gonna be easier for me to spot the meme coins. So I'm gonna keep my eyes peeled. I'll let everybody know as they come up. But I've also lost a lot of money in meme coins, so don't listen to anything that I say.
You need to talk to Josh. You need to talk to Josh about this, man, because he I don't know if I told you this, but it was back in that like 2013 boom or whatever it was with Bitcoin. He made like $500,000, man.
Yeah,
And he's always been very entrenched in Bitcoin, and every time it gets brought up, he's like he nerds out about it.
yeah,
Yeah, and he's pretty active and stuff in it as well too. He lost most of that wealth, as you can imagine, but
mm-hmm.
um,
That's how it goes.
yeah, what
I love to talk to him.
would that what you were describing though there about like cutting that thread, it reminds me of this thing that I think about a lot, and I try and like check myself on, but it's hard to like be honest with yourself and find the balance, right? You said that you got like it's hard to find balance in there because it's like with love and relationship, right? It's like on one end of the spectrum, it's like I could just completely detach and remove myself from that game, sort of like a yogi sitting in a temple somewhere for 40 years. And I think that that's one like extreme end of the spectrum. And then like the other like end of the spectrum is that extreme clinginess, like no, I need this, almost like this like feeling of like my survival depends on this sort of dependency here with this other person. And honestly, I think that both sides of that extreme are unhealthy. Like even the people, it's like I'm just going to completely dismiss the whole experience of life, to be to be in terms of nobility, you know what I mean? Like to be super noble
Yeah,
out here. But I found that like when you are able to, and I guess what I'm describing is true for a lot of different facets of life. But like when you are able to find that middle ground there and the balance, it truly feels magical, but it can be kind of hard to, and you see this with a lot of relationships because a lot of them do end up being very codependent and clingy, and or there's this sort of explosive rejection and just complete solitude of the other person,
mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it a lot with spirituality recently. Like with spirituality, there's the dark and the light, but on the dark side, there's like the dark, like the very negative dark, like harming individuals, whatnot, using black magic, imposing one's will on another. The dark doesn't inherently do that. That's like dark is good, or dark is, it just is, it's dark, it's not inherently negative, it doesn't inherently do negative things. And then on the other side there's the false light, which is the same as the dark, it's imposing one's will in this false, like, beyond bright light that like leads people into spiritual egoism, or leads people into its own self trap. And like, the it's finding a balance, absolutely, but then it's also, you're centered in that, in this polarity line, but you're also like, you're rooted in either side of it. I think
Mm,
that's a really important, interesting aspect. So that, like, because the dark is obviously important. I mean, like, the seed germinates in the dark, the baby grows in the dark. Dark is the womb, it's the infinite. Light is the singularity, it's the light. Dark is the medium, light is the action. So we need to be rooted in both of those regions. Yeah, that's been something that I've been toying with a lot recently, and thinking about, and trying to learn how to get to a place where I could even consider mastering.
yeah. And it's like, in a way, this is something I brush up a lot against, is like, it feels like somewhat of the reason, and this is a question I want to ask you, but somewhat of the reason like that they exist is like the sharpening of one another, right? And I guess it's like this kind of basic question that I think a lot of people grapple with, and especially during like very tragic times, right? It's kind of like core fear, if you will, like, why does evil exist in this world? Because it's so happy for people to accept the all is one, everything is so great when it's love, light, and rainbows. Um, but there's some really, really wicked, evil things in this world, and I think that's been something for myself that's been kind of hard to accept. Like, oh, if I am God, we're all one, all of that. It's like, why this? Why did we create that? Yeah, why do you think evil exists, man?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think this is a universe of polarity. Like that's the, at least in our third dimensional realm, third density realm. It's a universe of polarity. So I think that it has to exist. I don't think there's necessarily maybe even a reason. I think it has to exist, but it does. They do sharpen one another. I think light and dark are eternal lovers. They're in this constant dance, and I think our goal and our mission here is to find the balance between the two of them and break the paradox of the polarity, because polarities always have paradoxes. Um, yeah, I think that, yeah, like you said, it's for, I mean, like I had said, the seed doesn't germinate in the light. Like, we don't have, and you find the light in the darkness. Like, that's always how it goes. Like, shamans, yogis, Yeshua, they go to caves to meditate. You meditate in the dark, like you find the light in the dark. Um, and you find the dark in the light as well. I mean, it's all just one.
Right, right, and that dark thing too. There's a lot of people nowadays that are going to darkness retreats to spend a lot of extended time in the dark, and supposedly very intense psychoactivity occurs once you're completely entrenched in that darkness for several days in a row. Um, when I heard about that, it really, because a lot of people think about like the ancient use of psychedelics and maybe like the ancient, meditation techniques and things, but like also, you can't tell me that those motherfuckers weren't sitting in caves as well too. Um, and what I was saying a minute ago about like that hellish realm that I experienced, and it wasn't bad, it wasn't fiery, it wasn't demons, it was just dark and myself, and yeah, like so, like I know that you've you know had quite an extensive psychonautic career. So whenever you have also found yourself in similar hellish realms, what would you say has been like the evil that you've had to brush up against a lot in this life? Has there been any sort of common threads? Because I feel like there's been some common threads within my life of there's like these certain almost sharpeners that I've been handed as tools, you know. Um, but yeah, what are some of the evils that you've had to face, man?
Well, first I wanna comment that when I was going to this place, this hellish place, I went through these realms that were the typical depiction of hell. Like people crawling, grabbing my legs, screaming, asking me to save them, blood and pain, and it was very uncomfortable. When initially I knew that this is where I was going, and I was like, "Fuck, I really don't want to do this." It wasn't. I was able to remain detached, which was part of the whole mission. Like you got to remain detached from this, but after those realms, I kept going down and down and down and down and down until I got to that place where it was just me, and complete and utter loneliness. And in this space, and this is a place this is something that I've been thinking about quite a bit recently. This idea of what it would have been like to be alone as the creator with nothing, just nothing. There's no light. It's probably not even dark. I mean, maybe it's dark. I don't know. Just alone, completely alone. And this is something I actually remembered this night. Interestingly enough, right after I cut this cord, and released all of this energy from my solar plexus and my heart, right after I cut it, I had a flood of memories of me being like 2 or 3 or 4, laying in bed thinking about this, thinking about how this universe was created, what it would have been like, what it must have felt like to be God and be all alone and not know how to do anything about it. And then I got led through all of these realms that the creation, which is so infinite, and I can't even begin to put this into words. But yeah, that's an interesting question. My life is I've brushed up against a lot of darkness. I think the biggest one, and it's all like self-imposed, right? Like we create and manifest our own reality. So the biggest one for me has the biggest bits of darkness have been um, likely me being like externally have been me being taken advantage of, allowing myself to be taken advantage of because I've been so trusting and wanting people. And this ties in the dark and then that false light that I was talking about as well. I think more of my issues have been, well, that's not necessarily true. Um, when I was a kid, when I was 12, so I went to St. Paul Academy, which was like the premier prep school here in Minnesota, a private school, wealthy children. And I was, basically the top of my class um, at this prep school. And I just didn't feel like I vibed with everybody. I did when I was like a kid, second, third grade. But as I got into puberty, things changed a lot. And I was picked on, quite a bit. And it really, really, really messed me up. And like I started feeling unworthy. And I started feeling like, I just wanted people to see me and love me. And that led to this like really intense, deep spiral of self hate. And so that's that darkness for me for sure, is this like self hate. And it culminated in me um, when I was 13, starting to cut and starting to self mutilate. Then that culminated into me becoming anorexic. I wasn't anorexic for like my looks. I was anorexic because I felt literally like I did not deserve food. Like I felt worthless. I felt like I didn't deserve to eat. And then that led into a brief stint of psychosis, at which point I ended up going to, getting admitted to the psych ward, which is where I found the false light. And this is where, and that was drugs for me in a sense. And it was me creating stories and trying to get people to see me. And that's as much a part of this story or this darkness that this, lack of self-love was, or is. And, that turned into me, chasing this false light, chasing this light of ego for really until a few months ago. Like that's been my big life journey is to learn to, and it all comes back to self-love. And I think that's the case with really everybody. It always comes back to self-love. But then there's different like shades of that, right? My shading would have been different than somebody else's shading. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, as far as internal struggles, those are the evils that I've been up against the most.
Yeah, man, that false light thing seems very common. Like, and it seems like a common trap that a lot of people fall into. And I think that there's something to be said about um, Western people who have grown up in this kind of world, programmed in a certain way, and then having like just living in that reality, and then all of a sudden having these like explosive mystical experiences without really having had any sort of backbone going into those experiences, and then coming out of it not having any sort of like societal reaffirmation and like reintegration of the things that the insights that you had during that, the thought pattern changes that happen in that process. And one of the things that we're talking about in all of this is that hellish realm, right? And like that it was just the core of the hell to it was like this aloneness, this void of it, and you're by yourself. And while you were talking about that, it had me thinking about how you know across various cultures and religions, and even something that I've tapped into in a lot of my experiences, and I hear a lot of other psychonauts report, is this inclination or this feeling that there's like levels to this thing, right? Like different dimensions. Maybe, and maybe we can ascend, and maybe we come from a higher place, and all these different things. Yeah, and uh, like I've had experiences where it's felt like I've ascended to maybe the highest realm or a very high one where
Mm.
it truly feels like this kind of like unity point, like like what a lot of other people describe, like all is one. And within that there's this interesting thing that a lot of people report, that is this simultaneous, like you're everything but you're nothing, like you're alone but you're also with everything at the same time. um, and it's interesting to me, like the idea that at the top you can somewhat be alone, but there's this intense feeling of unconditional love, and like
Mm.
it's this safety net all wrapped into that. And then like it's like at the spiritual level bottom, it's like once again you're all alone, but in there it's hell, right? And like in between where we have all these fractalizations of ourselves, and I'm not saying that's like how it is, but I'm just like conceptualizing all of this in the way that a lot of people believe and frame it and stuff. And yeah, do you think, I'm just thinking out loud, do you think part of this is because of the ego, right? Like this ego would be you're edging God out. But that truly hellish existence is when you are in the service of this temporal state of yourself, and you're alone in it. You're truly alone in it. But the God state is like truly in this state of like egoless, and like maybe not complete egoless, but yeah, egoless, and you're in true service of everything and everyone. Um, Yeah, I know I'm getting just like going on one of these like esoteric psychedelic Jesus rants, but I'm just like trying to connect dots. And when you start to get to this like point in the conversation about these kind of topics, it can get very poetic and nuanced,
Yeah, well, and you're absolutely spot on, I feel. And then back to what we were discussing earlier, I feel like that balance that we're meant to live out in this world is to figure out how to be all, how to be the all, and how to have that unconditional love while simultaneously retaining our ego and our personality and our identity so that we can act in this realm, in this world, and so that we can create and build. And that's the other beautiful thing about this is that it's infinite. So there's never, one of the things that I've learned, once you get there, once there's never really there never is really loneliness because there's always something new. And if you're fractalized, like it's not, and have identity, it's not necessarily you creating it. So there's always an infinite amount of new realms and universes and experiences to experience. And yeah, this is it's one of these tough things that I've been trying to figure out how to articulate that I can see and feel so clearly. But really, when it comes down to it, there isn't loneliness. And maybe there was loneliness before the creation, but was there a before the creation? I don't know. I don't know if that's how it works. Or, but then I also think like, well, why when I was like 2 or 3 years old was I thinking about like, man, I feel like it was lonely when I was God, like I don't
Mm-hmm.
know why I had those thoughts, but um,
I
I
had
think
a
that
very I had a series of experiences right around the age of, like, right around the age that Hudson's at now, around 6 or 7, and it was induced by being introduced to, uh, religion and Christianity, and I was introduced to the idea that of hell, and told, if I didn't believe, then you were going to be lit on fire for forever. And as a kid, and that part forever, like that word forever, eternity, like that really stuck with me. And I remember like that night laying in my bed, it was almost kind of like I astral traveled, man. Like I was closing my eyes and I was trying to go as far as I could into the stars, like into this blackness, and I was trying to conceptualize forever, like eternity. And I guess in my 7-year-old state, like just that itself, like honestly kind of scared me. Like the forever, eternity, I couldn't conceptualize it. Like I was trying to go far and it felt like I was like going far, but I knew I couldn't go for forever. And the idea of having to go for forever also scared me. And then matched with the idea of being lit on fire for forever really, really scared me. But it's interesting that you
yeah,
describe this phenomenon because I remember myself too. And I've talked to other people who have described this at a young age, laying in bed at night, having these really deep existential thoughts that for me, it led me to tears at some point. You
yeah, yeah. It's what a terrifying thing to perpetuate on children or any human being. Yeah, how awful of us. But we're all just misguided, trying to find our way. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think we're creators, so there are realms essentially like that. We've created them, and we're also creators. So those realms, maybe they're forever right now, but we can deconstruct them at any point in time collectively.
Yeah. And if you think about it, universe has like a lot of these patterns and these things that repeat themselves at like different scales. And I mean, what you just said, quite literally, we are creators in the way that like we can create things, right? We can physically, manifest things into this world from and pull them from, ideas. And like what even is an idea? Like is that just something you have? Is that something that um, you're given? But you can also have like you can also have a physical sort of like reincarnation too. You can physically you can give life. I've always thought that to be a really really trippy concept about this world. Like I don't know, like the fact you know, and I remember another thing I heard in church as a kid was like that sex was the way in which God chose that we would like give new life. Um, and it's like when you think about it, like that's a crazy way that we chose. Um, but yeah, so I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but to kind of bring us back on track here just a little bit, uh, you know, we're getting into some deep territory about life and death and the just basic nature of our universe. And a lot of people who get into conversations like this and who exist in this space seem to have some sort of like mission or message thing like that they're driving home, or oh hey, I received like this download. Here's what I am to do with my life purpose. And like, I guess like my question for you is, what do you think like the goal is, and what do you think like your goal is within this life? Because, um, I'll be honest, man, it's something that sometimes I feel like I've figured out, and then sometimes there's this humbling kind of like thought, like, well, maybe I don't. Like this dichotomy of like, how much of it is divine intervention and planning, and how much of it is random controlled chaos that's allowed to play out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the goal, I think that I think that the goal is healing and to build a new world. I think the goal is creation. I think my mission has to do with helping facilitate healing on a global level, and through the, I think that ascension, I think that it's really just healing. Like, really, when it comes down to it, it's I think that that's our natural state, this like next level of existence. But we're born into this world with all these cords and all these ties and all these wounds. I mean, even just being birthed into the world is a wound, like being detached from this source. So like I think that the goal is healing, and I think that that's what brings us into a new world. But I think for that to happen, I think that we're starting to see this like information influx of kind of what's going on behind the scenes in the world. And we're starting to see some really dark things come up. Starting to see some really dark things come up. Some people that are doing some very dark things. Some people that are running the show that are doing some very dark things to keep themselves in power. And we're creators. That's a reflection of our collective energy and our collective thoughts. Um, and I think that we're nearing a point in time where that collective consciousness has been starting to heal, and I think that we're about to enter into the time where it's healed so much that the scale tips, and
Mm,
all of this information comes out fully. And I think that that's going to initiate a global dark night of the soul. And this is stuff that I've been
yeah,
shown, and I think it's going to be immensely painful for people that aren't privy to it now. And I think I even get chills just talking about it, because I know it. And I believe that that's the point where people like ours mission really comes into play. Like our mission currently has been, let's help people heal. We're utilizing Amanita, the Christ mushroom, the mushroom the one substance on the earth that we've seen does the most healing. It cuts the most cords. It cuts the most attachments. It reinforces this balance unlike anything else. And I think that very soon we're going to see this 100th monkey effect come into play, and the scales are going to tip, and everything's going to come out. Everything's going to come out. This darkness that's been perpetuating the world because we've done the work individually as a collective to get us to the point where the scale can tip. This energy that's been perpetuated by various individuals in our society and our world that have been playing out their role as members of our collective consciousness. I think that it's all going to be exposed and taken down. And at that point, there will need to be immense, immense, immense amounts of love and immense, immense, immense amounts of healing, because the world will go through their dark night of the soul. And I think that as that happens, we build the golden age, we build a new era, we build a new world. And I think that we're creators, like fully. I think that the entire universe is created by us. So I think that once this healing happens, we can create literally anything. We can create new physics. We can create literally anything. And I think that there's probably blueprints in place, right? But I think that we're also very, very potent creators, and we can create literally anything. So I think that as that healing then plays out, we then manifest the new creation. And this is a new creation with us knowing that we created everything beforehand. We created everything. We created all the ebbs and flows in history and culture, all the darkness, all the light. We created it all. And with that knowing and being healed, we can create literally anything. We can create new dimensions. We can create literally anything, and we can explore the creations that we've already done, already made, and change them and manipulate them. Time is, not linear. Time is constant. Um, so I think, and from what I've been shown, my mission here is to help in a small way to do what we've been doing and facilitate healing for individuals so that we can play our role in helping tip that scale. And then when the scale tips, I think your and I's mission, um, and a lot of people's missions, probably everybody that's listening, is to be love and be there for the global dark night of the soul so that we can help heal. And then it's game on. Then it's creation. Then it's the brand new world.
Yeah, there is this feeling in the air, especially right now, uh, and I feel like it's been brewing for quite some time, but it's like this amplified version feeling of like sort of good versus evil, right? And I think one of the things that we were recently talking about together is this idea and like this pattern within the universe of there being a lot of contractions and expansions. You know, the phoenix, you got to have the death for the rebirth. And I do think that, especially if people are in power and they don't want to give up power for things to massively shift, then yeah, there's going to have to be um, probably a lot of pain involved, right? But I guess just to be like, to rip the band-aid off, what exactly do you think that that looks like? A sort of, global shift like that?
Well, this isn't anything that I've talked about publicly before. None of what we're talking about is stuff that I've talked about publicly before. And for the sake of people who might not be ready, I'm not going to go fully into it, but I'll go into what I feel is good, or what I'm comfortable with. And first off, what I want to say is that I think that I think that probably anybody listening to this can agree that we're creators, right? Like, and can agree with this, like, this darkness being a reflection of the global collective consciousness, and we've been healing, so it's starting to come out more. Individuals have been healing more and more than they ever have. We're progressing further and further, so it's starting to come out more. So I think that there's a lot of people that are really concerned right now for where things are going, and I can empathize with that 100%. I understand that. I have nothing but love for these individuals, and I'm here for them. But I think maybe they're being confused by a false light. And I think that if one can look at it as being our creation and history and events being reflections and responses to what we're going through, I think that if you look at the amount of people that are progressing and that are healing in this world all over, um, and you really truly believe that this world is a reflection, I think it becomes undeniable that we're about to reach this point where everything comes out and global healing can really begin, because we are hitting that 100th monkey effect. Wounds have been healing. People have been healing. You've been doing the work. Um, so I think with that, like, um, it can hopefully maybe make things a little bit more comfortable, and allow one to have more trust and more faith if if they're feeling scared and afraid right now. That being said, I think I believe that at some point here soon we're going to see this, global cabal get exposed. We're going to see this this massive ring of people utilizing the dark the negative side of darkness, or the evil side of darkness, or the imposing the self-will side of darkness. I think people are going to start seeing what it actually means and what it's done to people, to children, to you, to your families. And I think that it's going to be taken out in essence. And I think that in that process, the shock from people realizing what's been actually going on in the world, it's going to be like having your wife cheat on you. You know what I mean? Like that type of shock and heartbreak, but on a global level, on a level way beyond that. I think that there have been a collective of people preparing for this, which I think we're a part of. I'm sure a lot of the listeners are a part of. And that's why I also emphasize that, like, it's so important that when this event happens, like, we are there to love these people purely, because we're all in this together. We're all going to be creating together. We all are creating together. And we've all also created darkness, this evil, to sharpen the blade, like you said earlier, for the seed to germinate. Like, so I think that right now the seed has been germinating for the past 5 years, or even maybe even the seed has cracked open for the past 5 years. And I think that the moment that this happens, that this event happens, is the moment the seed breaks out from the soil, the sprout, and
Mhm.
gets blinded by the light and has to learn to integrate that darkness and become rooted in it, fully, so that it can reach up to the heavens. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, so there's a lot of elements to that I want to unpack. There's definitely sort of this feeling with it all that at this point, like the cat's already out of the bag. You know what I mean? Like you're not gonna shove it back in. Like you know, so one thing that a lot of people talk about with psychedelics in particular, but I think this pertains to just about like all esoteric, spiritual sort of things. Um, but this idea that this sort of mystical place or the true source, phoning home, returning back to love, like that's something that human beings have been doing, since probably the dawn of our civilization, in a myriad of different ways, whether it be caves, meditation, psychedelics, things like that. And when you look at like the 1960s and like that whole sort of like revolution, um, I say revolution, but that blip of a renaissance that kind of poked through for a minute, um, like I get this feeling that when we talk about this, kind of like I was saying earlier, like there's both like this sort of divine intervention, but also random controlled chaos. And I get this feeling that if this mystical place, the true source of where we come from, if that's really what like we're interacting with and we're doing here and we're all trying to get back to, that's ingrained into us, and that's something like we're going to fucking do. And no matter how much you try and suppress it, no matter what the sort of structure is, no matter what the evil sort of structure is, at times, like kind of like in the 1960s, it might have been random in the sense that like if that's there, of course at some fucking moment it's going to blurp its head up. And I think
Mm-hmm.
something like LSD, with its ability to be manufactured and plop everywhere, I think that really helped kind of be like rocket fuel for that sort of like little blip, all of us putting our head above the surface of the water for the minute. But
Yep.
where it does feel like, man, we're at this point in time with it all where like I said, the cat's out of the bag, and it's here. No longer is it going to sort of be uh, held up by this bureaucratic nonsense. But yeah, man, what do you think that when you say there's something you said in there? You said we're going to need to really love them. Like that's going to be really, really important. Can you kind of like unpack that a little bit? What did you mean exactly by that? We're going to need to really, really love them when all of this happens.
Yeah. Um, I think it. I think it goes back to this concept we were touching on earlier with this balance. and there's like the false light side of it, which would be like completely like overlooking the fact that like collectively we all, not just these individuals that we're looking to help, but collectively we all contributed via our thoughts and our lack of healing to this realm, to this world that we've to this this aspect of humanity that's been doing such negative things. And then there's also the other side of it, which is negative, which would be like, you know, you were fucking wrong, you know, and like being accusatory and not being there for them. So I think that there's this balance to be found in just complete acceptance and love and gratitude for what each individual has done to, you know, contribute to this collective story that was necessary, absolutely necessary to sharpen the blade, to germinate the seed, to allow
Mm-hmm.
that sprout to pop out of the soil. Um, so just like, and that's really what unconditional love is. Like unconditional love is pure love, but also with wisdom. Like you can't have true love without wisdom, and like knowing that somebody knowing that we all contributed to something that was very, very painful is an important thing to not forget. And I think that's
Mm,
just as important as being, you know, unconditionally loving to the
mm,
people that are in a lot of pain. Um, yeah.
yeah. It feels like the story that we have somewhat been collectively playing out for a very long time now. If I had to guess, I would say probably like damn near thousands of years. The majority of people have been collectively playing out this story of individually healing themselves and their own living out their own individual hero's journey, right? But kind of like what we're describing, it feels like that it necessitated all of that and continues to necessitate all of that individual healing, right? For this sort of like collective healing and collective hero's journey. But that becomes Christ consciousness, if you will. But that becomes, I think, complicated for a lot of people at the individual because it truly requires a ninja to sit in that and to balance, right? Like, I think it's really easy for a lot of people to. I don't want to say it's easy. I would say it is easier on your journey to have your own individual hero's journey and to reach that place of peace and equanimity. And then you can sit in that. It's kind of, like the yogi at the temple for the rest of his life for the next 60 years. But a lot of people, I would say me and you included, we've reached that mountaintop and we've come back down. Um, and we want to ground some of these things and help the collective on the collective's hero's journey. But that requires our participation within the collective. It's like we can't just isolate ourselves anymore. And I think a lot of people, myself included, sometimes struggle with the balance of that, right? Because it feels so peaceful when I've isolated myself in a way. But it's like,
Mhm.
oh, actually, like I need to be a part of it, you know? So yeah, like how do you find balance in that, dude?
Well, a couple things came up. I think it's so important to recognize that we've all contributed to this individually and globally. Um, one of the things when one puts themselves in isolation, I feel like it takes so much longer to actually fully get through. And it's such a beautiful aspect of this existence that we live in. But like I've also found that for me personally, me doing something that I know hurts somebody, when that comes up and it's fully realized, made real, it hurts more than anything. Nothing comes close to that pain. Like the pain that I've caused the people that I've interacted with, like in the most extreme instances of that shit hurts worse than fucking anything. Like nothing comes close. And I think that I'm losing track of the question, but this is a good thread to pull. I think that basically everybody is going to be forced to see how they contributed to this stuff. And in that, like, we're talking about the most horrific stuff a human being can do. And we're going to have to collectively and individually come to terms with the fact that it wasn't just that human being doing it. It was us. It was you. It was me. It was you. Like, um, and that's going to be the most intense pain, I think, humanity on a global level has ever felt. Like, by bar none, nothing will come close to it. So I lost your question, but yeah, I think that's an important thing to note.
I think I kind of lost it too, but I was thinking of another question. While you were speaking there, it brought up another question for me. Um, and oh gosh, I lost track of that question as well.
We're going so deep. When you go this deep,
I know, dude.
it's hard to hold on to the threads. It's like a DMT trip. You like can only bring back so much.
Yeah, it's like that thing I described to you at 7 years old of like pushing and traveling into the stars. That's kind of what this conversation also
Yeah.
feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we're
there's so
like
many.
simultaneously going into the stars and going like down as well, like into the womb.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, man. And I also took about a gram of some dried Nordic caps before this to
Nice.
get into the spirit of Amanita. Yeah, it's been
I
like close to a week since I've taken a Amanita. So
Nice. I took 3 grams of some Siberian closed cap, so I'm with you, brother.
oh, nice, very
Yeah, I
nice,
like the
man. Did you
idea
do it raw?
of what's that? I did do it raw. Yeah, I just ate them. Yeah, I just ate them. Yeah,
Yeah.
which I've been doing a lot recently, as you know. And I actually really, really, really love it. I really love the ibotenic acid. I really love dissociatives, though. They click with my brain. Like they I don't know. They've taught me more than anything else, honestly. Well, I don't know. They've taught me different things than
Let's
something like DMT has.
let's let's get into that a little bit, man.
Sure.
It's the dissociatives, if we can,
Yeah.
because kind of like you were just saying, we both took a little bit of Amanita before this, and we both took ours raw, in the raw caps of the mushroom, which retains a good amount of the ibotenic acid, and the ibotenic acid has this glutaminergic activity that does feel, dissociative, and it's different than ketamine, but it's like in this weird way kind of similar, and dissociatives. Yet I've always found that dissociatives have given me access to this very unique um, sliver of the universe, it feels like. And one of the things that we've talked about as well too with dissociatives, and especially ketamine, right, especially the K-hole, is that it can simultaneously be so important and feel so important, but also like not be important. And like that can be a trap.
Hmm.
But
Well
I've had a
said.
lot of experience. Yeah, I've had a lot of experiences, especially like in the K hole, man, where it's like truly felt like I was solving something, like solving some sort of
Mhm.
problem. And there's been a select few times where I've had really deep experiences like this where I felt like I was kind of solving some sort of problem, and simultaneously I experienced a very pronounced, like, therapeutic, um, energetic effect that would last. And I know people refer to the afterglow. There's a measurable sort of physiological afterglow to taking ketamine with the GABA and how things rebalance themselves and things like that. But I've had some of these experiences where it's like I figured this thing out in this weird corner of the universe, and like I felt really damn good afterwards. Like it truly felt like
Mhm.
satisfying. Like, and maybe it played out somatically. Maybe I placeboed myself into that. Maybe I actually psycho spiritually did some shit, that I was supposed to do. Um, yeah, and I just kind of want to like get your opinion on all of that and hear like what your sort of dissociative experience have been like, what they've accumulated to, and how it's played into this like sort of entire story and everything that you've been, laying out here.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I think that you are psycho spiritually figuring something out. I think that there's different levels to that though, and eventually, like if used repetitively, I think there's a time and a place, right? And like you feel callings and stuff. The callings with ketamine are a little more difficult for me to hear and heed to than the callings for something like DMT or Amanita. But yeah, I think regardless, it is important, and that's why it feels important. However, there are levels to that importance, and like once it gets not important enough, like it gets very detrimental to the body and to the spirit to do these things. And I think that that point probably comes really quickly with ketamine. Like I've been dancing with it for the past week, working on some stuff, and like I've known that I needed to work on this stuff, and I completed my work on this stuff 2 nights ago, and it was already starting to get to the point where if I didn't complete what I was doing, it was going to be very detrimental to me, my psyche, my body. Um, Fortunately, I was able to complete it. It's a game, you know. You're kind of walking the line and tiptoeing. Um, but yeah, if I were to continue playing in that realm and trying to do important things, like the importance is so minimal now that I've completed what I needed to do that it would literally only be detrimental to me. It would only hurt me in the end. Yeah, again, I think that that is a hard line to find with ketamine. I think that ketamine also is inherently more in the dark than in the light. I think that it's inherently more in the dark and more in the false light. Again, it's not a bad thing at all. Like, but you need to be very rooted. You need to be very, very grounded to like to be able to do that important work, and you need to be very open, and you need to be listening extraordinarily well and feeling to know when is it's time to do this work and when it's just feeling important. And I've had a lot of experiences with dissociatives to get here. We've talked about our DXM experiences when we were a kid, you know, like after I got out of the psych ward, I found cannabis and started smoking and, you know, drinking alcohol and taking pills. But at, 14, but I also found Robitussin, which is the easiest thing for me to get. And it was my favorite. It just happened to be my favorite. So I would stay up, 2, 3 nights a week, every week, drinking bottles of Robitussin. And I did that for a year and a half. I've drinking hundreds of bottles of Robitussin,
Yeah.
and it was incredible. It was incredible. I was I I lost a bunch of IQ points, I feel like, as far as our current I used to be a fucking genius, but I lost a bunch of intelligence as far as our current standards, but I gained so much intelligence in other realms like spiritual intelligence and emotional intelligence. Yeah, I did a lot of DXM. One of the things, I don't know if we've talked about this, but one of the interesting things that I would think about back then, um, and it's so interesting that I used to think about this stuff so little because then it all went away in my teens, and then it all came back when I found like quantum mechanics and stuff. Um, I guess it didn't go away in my teens, but I guess I've been thinking about this stuff my whole life. But so I used to know when I was a kid, when I was on DXM, this is a new territory. Like no humans have not taken this drug before. This drug was not around in
Oh,
Atlantis. This is a new territory.
yeah.
Like who knows? Maybe LSD was around in Atlanta. I don't fucking know. It might have, but I mean, ergot. So like something
I think
similar.
LSA was. If I had to
Yeah,
guess,
LSD,
they were doing some
LSD
LSA
was
brews.
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like DXM is like, and ketamine probably too. Maybe not. I don't know. I wonder if they had dissociatives back then. I wonder. But like,
Well, they're
regardless,
starting to find some. They're starting to find some. I think I read something the other day about a new potential dissociate they found in nature, and it like there's so many untapped like plants and things, and there's Amanita
Amanita is it.
with the
Yeah, yeah,
ipecac. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if there was like
yeah. I
something
wouldn't
that
be
either we
surprised.
don't know about or like that went extinct at some point that they utilize. But it also wouldn't surprise me if like within their like say Atlantis in particular within their blip of existence if they didn't brush up against dissociatives. That reality wouldn't surprise me either. Um,
I
yeah,
honestly feel like dissociatives are such an important aspect in like if you think about the collective, like and each individual is contributing to the collective. I feel like you and I having dissociative experiences and doing them right is contributing more than like I think it's contributing so much to the collective and the shift. I think, and that's maybe one of the reasons why it feels so important, you know. So maybe it is important to have people that are just like, I mean, it is because it's happening. It wouldn't be happening unless it was, where people are having, they're so dissoed out for months or years or whatever that they end up, you know, ruining their bladder and dying. Like that shit happens. And like, I guess it is important because we need it for this story that's playing out. We wouldn't have it happen
Mm,
otherwise. So that's
yeah,
interesting. But
that's an interesting.
I
I was
also
gonna say
think
it's an
that,
interesting take. Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, I think that dissociatives are very important for this new shift because they help you, like DMT and psychedelics help you, how do I phrase this? Help you interact with other realms, where dissociatives help you become the other realms. Like I don't, and like Amanita does this to an extent. It does it to an extent. Maybe that's why it's the freaking Christ mushroom. You know, like you know, one of the many, many, many reasons. But like something like ketamine or PCP, like it connects you. Like you can experience other dimensions, like fully. You can collide, you know, with other dimensions. And if we're supposed to be like integrating another dimension into our reality, we need people experiencing them for that to collectively manifest. So maybe dissociatives are extremely, extremely important. Maybe that's one of the reasons why it feels so important. And then, yeah, so after my DXM days, I didn't do any dissociatives until, I mean, I like bumped a little K a couple times in my early 20s, but I got into hard drugs and, you know, did bad things for my body and whatnot. Um, you know, almost died. And then when I turned 26 or 27 or something, I found 3-MeO, PCP, and ketamine. It was 2017 New Year's. I went to my first like space, and that it was so important, and that became my life for like 2 years, where me and my ex-wife were doing 3-MeO PCP and all the other dissociatives we could get legally, because you could get them on the clear web, you know, back then they were still legal. And it was, I mean, for the first 6 months, I was like a god. I felt like a god. Like I was able to do so much. I was on top of the world. It was manic, but still, like, it was a really powerful, important time in my life. And it was important. It was important for me to experience that. And then I, you know, I was in the false light side of it, very heavy, after probably doing some really important work that I needed to do. And then eventually that false light, as the false light does, got darker and darker and darker, but it still has you trapped into it. And I got fat and I got lazy and my businesses started to, you know, falter, and I was just a mess, but I couldn't see it. Like I had no idea because I was so blinded by that false darkness at this point. And yeah, that's actually what led me. I know we've talked about my benzo story before and getting off of opiates. That's what led me to getting off of everything. Was so how important was that? Like that was drastically important that I went through that. And I'm sure on some level it was very important for the collective. If I'm tapped into this, and that dissociatives helped me see my darkness, very, very, or at least the surface level of my darkness, so that I could be like, fuck that. I don't want that anymore. I'm going to start taking care of that. And then, you know, as I got sober and then found Amanita, I started digging and digging and finding the rotting roots that were keeping me stuck. And yeah, so I've had lots of dissociative experience, lots of 3-MeO, PCP, and other crazy research chemical dissociatives. It was fun though. I mean, I won't lie. It was a fun time.
Yeah, I've experienced that really hardcore, that feeling of it feeling important in the moment. And I thought that your take there was pretty interesting. That, well, I mean, if you think about it in the literal sense, kind of like the butterfly effect, like, yeah, every single one of them is extremely important and necessary. And I agree with that. Then also brings into the question and the element of, you know, uh, what sort of like game of the gods are you potentially playing by interacting with this place? Because, you know, one of the things that you and I have talked about is that certain types of experiences induced by different plant medicines, um, seem to necessitate a sort of cultural and religious matrix around them to produce a certain type of effect,
Programming.
right? Yeah, yeah. And, kind of like you were saying, DXM, ketamine, 3-MeO-CP, they don't have a backlog and a collective conscious really history of interacting with that realm, but we do know that the matrix that exists around it is so incredibly important to like where we end up at, but yet these ones are void of it, you know.
Yeah.
um
Can I interject?
Please do.
Yeah. No. This is such a great, beautiful topic that I've thought so much about. So like with and I was touching on it earlier, but we went off on one of our awesome threads. With DXM, I knew nobody's ever done this before. Like we're pioneers, but not only are we pioneers, I knew in that space like we're creators. So like I was creating this matrix around it. I was creating what the experience would be for people utilizing it in the future. Like
Hmm.
I was programming the experience literally, and I knew this. Like I inherently knew it as a kid. And so then you have something like, um, I mean, same with any dissociatives, but DXM was particular for that one because it had just been created. But then you have something like Amanita, or any substance. So another thing that I've heard and that's really resonated with me. I actually don't know if I've heard this. Maybe this is something that I came up with. I don't know. But this thought that maybe things like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, for instance, is actually like instructions for programmed ayahuasca trips, or whatever they used out there. So like if you follow these rituals and take a certain substance, you will get a set, a very you will be in a parameter of types of experiences that you can have. And I think that that's
Hmm.
totally doable, just like it was with the Grateful Dead at their music. You take LSD at the Dead, like everybody's in this parameter. They're in this box. Like they all experience their own experience, but it's all confined in this box. So I have a feeling that we can do that with really any substance, and we can create any type of box, and any substance can, just like doing ayahuasca with the shaman is going to be a lot different than doing it, in your home or whatever, like by yourself. And like I have a feeling that we have this beautiful opportunity to do that with Amanita. I don't think that there really is any box that's been created, and I think the opportunity to do it
Yeah.
with Amanita is that healing, is what we spoke about earlier, is the healing
Yeah.
of the collective. It's evolution. It's evolution of humanity. So you frame
Yeah.
one of these programs around the evolution and the healing of humanity and creating a new world. And I think, I think this is what Amanita has been telling me this whole time, like trying to get me to see, or my
Mm.
higher self or whatever. Like I think we create this programming, so to speak, this bioorganic programming for the Amanita experience. And I think, we've been discussing how to do this. So I think this is what we do. And in doing this, I think we create a program and a platform and a set of instructions that, with the intention of the individuals experiencing it and the collective belief system around it, I think we can create a platform that can literally help evolve the world. And like, what a fucking far out, amazing concept. But like, I think that's what we're gearing up to do. I sure hope that it
It's
is.
it's so powerful because it's void of this matrix around it, like we're describing. Yet that matrix is so incredibly powerful. Amanita is so incredibly powerful. A common um, trend thread that you see with religion and cultures and all these things is that I swear at the start of it all, and I think most people would agree with this, like at the start of it all, at the origins of all of it, all these prophecies, myths, Bible stories, religions. It's the mystical impulse, right? Somebody has a mystical moment somehow, some way, right? And then, but the unfortunate thing is that that mystical impulse is almost always then turned into and follows down into the line of dogmatism. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that to me seems like one of the biggest traps. Like, and one thing that you and I have talked about a lot is that like Well, when you actually study and look at, like, say, for instance, something like Christianity, it's like, oh, damn, it's like, it's actually very magical and probably very spot on with a lot of shit, you know? But through dogmatism and human beings funneling it in for their own sort of purpose, or for their own sort of gain, right? That hellish realm, once again, they're in the service
Or
of
the false light.
themselves. Yeah, yeah. And it's, yeah, and I think I agree with you that I think Amanita is this incredible kind of opportunity where there doesn't exist that cultural matrix around it. But let me ask you this, though, man, just thinking out loud here, since we've been diving into all this. how do you, how do we, as human beings who are inherently flawed, because that's what we are, me and you both very flawed, but just like everybody else, how do we create a matrix that is void of dogmatism?
Well, it goes back to the conversation earlier. The dogmatism is a reflection of the lack of healing. It's a reflection of the darkness in ourselves. So we heal, we heal, we heal, and we build this matrix while the world is healing. You know, I told this story last night. Not a story that I tell much, but when I was going through benzo withdrawal, this is a good one. When I was going through benzo withdrawal, I was walking in the woods, and I've had a lot of instances like this, a lot of similar ones, but this is one of the more powerful ones. I was walking in the woods. I was, in so much pain, being tortured every day, constant torture. I would say that I would rather be strapped to a chair and tortured for 6 months than go. Like I would literally say that every day because it was so painful. And I had this thought come into my head, this huge flash of positive information. And I started learning all this stuff. And honestly, learning this stuff about what I'm supposed to do and where the world's going to go, it kept me alive through all that. Like, I don't know if I would have made it otherwise, but it's part of my story. It's part of the story. And this thought came into my head. Um, basically, um, they're paving the way for you. Your mission starts when the world turns. And right when I had this thought, this massive something along those lines, the world needs to turn before what we were showing you can really happen, which is I think what we've been discussing and probably a lot more. But right as this thought came into my head, this butterfly that the size of a basketball that was black and iridescent blue flew right over my right shoulder, and I could feel the wind on my ear. The biggest butterfly I've ever seen in my entire life, within a millisecond of this massive thought being put into my head, flies. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but it was
Can I
such a
tell you something real
profound.
quick?
Yeah.
Please continue with this story, but I have to interject and tell you this. I am actually talking to a guy right now who's about to tattoo a butterfly on my ring finger right there for my girlfriend Libby, and he's
Uh,
going to make it. He's going to put specks of blue in it for me because that's Hudson's favorite color. And when me and Hudson were just in Gatlinburg this past weekend, we were at this they have a million of these tourist trap stores with gifts and things like that. But Hudson saw a little gold necklace with a blue butterfly pendant,
yeah.
and he picked it up. Said, "I want to get this for Libby because he knows that she loves butterflies." So I just wanted to
That's
give you
amazing.
that while you continue on with your story about this
Yeah, that's
blue
so
butterfly.
cool. What a good. I love these because it gives so much weight to what we say. Like when synchronicities like that happen, it adds so much weight, and it allows people, ourselves included, to listen just a little bit more or a lot more, because that was one of the bigger synchronicities in my life. And then of course the energetic imprint of that, there has to be other synchronicities that tie in, so that's really cool. That's
Yeah.
really the end of the story. But I think another thing that I wanted to mention, I'm glad I remembered this, is that I had a customer in the early days say that he was shown that Amanita wasn't brought to this world until 9,000 years ago, and until after the fall of Atlantis. And I felt into it, and I was like, you know what? That actually sounds right. That actually feels right. And if we're going back to this, like maybe maybe they didn't have it before, and maybe it is a very, very, very integral part of the evolution of humanity. Maybe we've been gifted or chosen or choosed ourselves to act out that aspect of the Great Awakening and the the Golden Age. Like, and yeah, I don't know. It does resonate though. It does resonate. And how
Yeah.
crazy is that? And how beautiful.
Well, and there's this theory that's put forth a lot. It's one of the biggest talking points about Amanita muscaria, but a lot of people theorize that it's the Christ mushroom, and a lot of people theorize that it had a heavy hand and a heavy part to play in like the early forms of Christianity, and maybe even in like Jesus Christ's life. And like you've said before on other podcasts, if you look at the earliest depictions of Adam and Eve, they're covered in Amanita muscaria. They're like wrapped up in it. And so if that was the case, that Amanita was involved in all of these things, and it was a big part of life and culture at some point, especially within these sort of like technologically advanced prophetic societies where some of their messages and things still resonate and are part of the foundation of the reality that we live in today. It's really interesting to me because of everything we've talked about with the sort of cultural matrix. And when you smoke, like when you like say, for instance, smoke DMT, which I know vaporizing DMT, that route of administration doesn't has like a relatively new cultural matrix itself, but there's still something about that where the DMT molecule itself, it feels like you're tapping into some sort of space internet collective consciousness thing, that there's this feeling that a lot of people report that like what I'm tapping into has been here for a long time, and probably a lot of other human beings have interacted with this thing, right? And if you think about it, if Amanita was involved in all of this, that would mean in a way there is, I would believe, some sort of energy that is wrapped up in this mushroom. And um, enough so that it looks like a lot of people theorize it was very important to them, and they were trying to protect it. And for whatever reason, it kind of got lost in time, and some people in some regions still kind of did it and had some small cultures of it, but it, for the most part, really got simultaneously repressed, but also never forgotten about. Right, it's the most iconic mushroom, even though it's like nobody actually knows what it is or has heard of it. When you
Mm.
tell people what is that mushroom, some people might know it's Amanita, but like 98% of people aren't going to know actually like what it is, what it does. The actual cultural history and impact of it. So yeah, like, do you think that Amanita might itself have a bit of this, yeah, like Christ energy infused into it? And when people say,
Yeah.
everyone's always talked about the second coming of Christ. One thing that me and you've talked about a lot, and I've said it to a lot of other people, I could see the second coming of Christ being the second coming in like a form of, some sort of consciousness or wave or
Yeah.
energy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we. This is what I believe, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot of reasons why I believe this. I'm not going to get into any of those. Maybe on a future podcast. It's not time for that yet. But I believe that Yeshua was a portion of this oversoul Christ entity, this entity that is the Christ entity. I believe that John the Baptist was as well. I believe that Paul the Apostle was as well. I believe that the disciples were as well. I believe that there are aspects of this entity, there are personalities of this entity that are alive today in our world right now, this Christ entity. And I believe that the mushroom is an aspect of this Christ entity that has been around for however long it's been around. So I think that it is, yes, I think that it is. It's not just carrying, I mean, it's carrying that because it is a part of this entity that I believe has been guiding humanity in essence for the entirety of humanity's existence. That's what I believe.
I do too.
Yeah, yeah. Get
I
'em.
do too, man.
Let's fucking go.
Oh, dude, it's coming. So, reject this if you don't want to talk about this at all, but I had this written down and I thought it could potentially be somewhat interesting to loop into this. And I personally haven't talked to this about you a whole lot myself. I've heard little blurbs of it, but yeah, tell me about your grandfather, man.
Oh,
And
okay.
if you would like to.
We can touch on this. Yeah. So I'm a warehouser. Yeah, this is really, yeah, I guess I can start talking about this. I don't know how, I mean, it's going to happen at some point, right? So it doesn't really matter. It's going to come out at some point. So, my great grandfather, great on my dad's side was Frederick Weyerhaeuser. Frederick Weyerhaeuser was the timber king. So you have Rockefeller, you have Vanderbilt, you have Carnegie, and you have Weyerhaeuser. Weyerhaeuser was the second wealthiest man in the world next to Rockefeller. That's my great grandfather. So that's my lineage. Um, but so his net worth is worth like 100 something billion right now. Like what he had back then is worth the equivalent of like 100 something billion. It's like 80 billion in Forbes from maybe like I don't know 10 years ago. So who knows what it is now? Maybe it's double because inflation is fucking awful. But so that's my family. However, he was a good man. He was a good man. He wasn't a cutthroat businessman. He didn't, as far as I'm aware. I mean, I don't know. I like to say like he didn't join. I like to say he didn't join the evil cults. I don't know if this is. I don't know if there were evil cults that were trying to bring him in, or I'm assuming so. But like he was a good man, regardless. He was a good man. He was also an anonymous man. He didn't want to be spoken about. He didn't want to be talked about much. My assumption is because of all the corruption that's associated with wealth and stuff like that. But I don't know. Maybe not. Regardless, he was a very secretive and private and anonymous man. But he was a good man, so he's not spoken about. Nobody knows who Weyerhaeuser is. Yet he was a very. I mean, he built America. He built America. And we have family. We have a big family, very wealthy family. We have 500 members in the family as of now. 500 living members. Lots of kids. It gets bigger as the generations spread. Um, but yeah, that's where I come from. And he was a businessman that based his business on um, cooperation instead of competition. Where like all the other business, he was like the only one. He was like the only one of them of these big monopolistic, oligarchs. Like cooperation instead of competition, which is amazing. It's like a sliver of that light Christ energy in that time. Like nobody else was doing this as far as I'm aware. He would instead of buying his competitors out and destroying them, he partnered with everybody, which is interesting because that's kind of what we're looking at doing and trying to do and accomplishing right now. And everybody trusted him because he was a good man. He was a good businessman, so everybody wanted to do business with him. He also, yeah, I don't know, but yeah. So that was Frederick. There's, and just a quote that kind of shows what kind of a man he was that I really like. There's a bunch of them, but this is a good one. Um, well, there's two that I'll say. The first is asking about like why he's doing what he's doing, like why he's doing this, why he wants this to be so big. And he says, well, there's a couple quotes. One is he just likes big business; it's fun for him. But the one that gets spoken about a lot in our family is, it's not for me, it's not for my children, it's for my children's children. So that's me, like, or his children's children. That's me. And that's a beautiful thing and a good way to look at it, which is, spoken about a lot nowadays as well in wealth creation circles. But the other one was when somebody wrote an article about him and the article was entitled "Richer Than Rockefeller." Because like nobody really knew what your net worth was back in these days, so they thought that Frederick was richer than Rockefeller, and they were kind of trying to expose him. This whole article goes into how he's richer than Rockefeller and blah blah blah, and he's talking to somebody about the article, maybe his kids or something. I don't know. He says, "Well, I don't think I'm the richest man in the world, but I think I might be the happiest." And like that's such a good quote. Like what a powerfully beautiful quote. And it just it attests to his character, So yeah, I come from a really big family of a lot of really, really, really wonderful people that have kept this spirit alive, and it's a beautiful thing. It's also, if what we're speaking about comes to fruition, it's a lot of leverage. It's a whole lot of leverage, to utilize for what we try to do. But yeah, I mean, I love the family. I used to feel like a black sheep in the family. I think probably rightfully so. I had dreadlocks my whole life too. Come on. But now I like to say that I'm the rainbow sheep of the family. And I think that probably adds up and makes sense. Like, but yeah, it's a really interesting thing to be a part of, and it's a really beautiful thing, and it makes sense for my story. And the other really fascinating thing that I love to bring up is Frederick. What did he make his money at? What was his life? His life was timber. Where does timber come from? It comes from coniferous trees. Where do amanitas grow? They grow under coniferous trees. Like, so it's almost as if I'm extending that legacy, and the story was like being written from him that I'm going to then finish. It almost feels like that in a sense. And who knows? I'm just Christian from Minnesota. Like, I don't know, but like, yeah, it's a pretty fun, interesting thing to think about. Thanks for asking about that. It's not something that I've spoken about publicly at all.